I welcome to football today, August 9th, 2024. And we were just at Jets Commanders joint practice. So we're going to talk about that. The Ayuk news, we were hoping that something would break by time we did this show, because it just feels like for 3 days that something's been on the verge. So we're kind of going to just talk about it from the 49ers angle and then the Steelers angle, and then maybe just copy and paste that into the next episode. Justin, how are you?
Hey, Bobby Skinner. We've seen a lot of Giants-Lions joint practices, which have been fun and intense. We saw a day in the rain. It was pouring rain of Washington Commanders, Jayden Daniels, and an Aaron Rodgers-less New York Jets, which was a little disappointing. Robert Saleh chose to hold them out of practice because of the rain and because of the weather. And yes, that was his reasoning. So I'm good. Excited to talk about those four teams, I guess, a little bit. We're going to talk about Ayuk, and then also next week for Tuesdays or even Wednesdays. I guess we're going to push football today to Wednesday next week, because you and I will be going up to Foxborough to see Drake May. We'll see Drake May and the New England Patriots practice on Monday, and then we'll see Drake May and the New England Patriots have a joint practice with the Eagles on Tuesday.
Yeah, we're there to see Nick Gates. So, like I said, I want to save the Ayuk stuff for the second part of this. We were at this joint practice, and I love watching these joint practices. I wish we could go to every single one there is every year, because I do think you learn a good bit about these teams. And you can see like how they're starting to run things, especially when you have new coaches. But the biggest takeaway just overall from Jets Commanders are these are just two teams on the opposite sides of the spectrum.
100%.
Right? Like the Jets are a team that are contending this year, right? And Aaron Rodgers didn't practice today. I think one of the smartest moves they made all offseason was bringing in Tyrod Taylor. So guess what? Their offense looked all right even without Aaron Rodgers. Where if last year we were at a practice and Aaron Rodgers wasn't there, it would have been awful to watch. We would have no offensive takeaways from what we were seeing. And then on the Commanders, it's everything's new. New coach, new coordinators, new quarterback. Almost every defensive starter is new outside of, Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne, and some of their secondary. And we came out just thinking this is just a team that is going to really struggle this year. And I think that's why they came in, 30th in our power rankings this year?
Right. And where do you want to start off with? Let's start off with Jayden Daniels on the offensive side of the ball, since that's probably what a lot of people want to hear. So you were primarily watching the offensive side of the ball, even though I will say I eventually, now that when I figured out how the structure of the practice was working, I eventually was starting to peek over to the Commanders offense and Jets defense. So they were on the field.
The Jets do a good job of letting you see both as well.
Yeah, so they were on the field to the left of us, a little bit further away, and then we had the Jets offense and the Commanders defense in front of us. The Commanders offense was calling plays. Every play that they would run, the Jets offense would run two plays. So you had two fields that were going at two completely very different paces. And I think that was you saw the overall effectiveness of the two units as well. Like one offense was kind of explosive, throwing it down the field, then running the ball well and just operating pretty efficiently. And then the other side of the field that was going much slower was kind of a mess.
And granted, the Commanders' offense was going up against, maybe the best corner group in the NFL, and then the exact
best defense.
The exact opposite on the other side, where the Commanders' secondary is just really bad. But with Jayden Daniels, right, you have the second overall pick in the draft. That's the guy you're going to watch the most. And I left a little frustrated, right? I had him at 8 for 15, right? And I'm not looking at training camp stats, but me and you were talking. It's like, man, this is like a Cliff Kingsbury meme out here, because they ran a few screens, and essentially every successful play was either a 10-yard hitch or an out route to the left.
Yep. Every
Every single play to Terry McLaurin, and they also did, Terry McLaurin was going up against Bryce Hall instead of Sauce Gardner, because Sauce Gardner doesn't follow wide receiver one.
I thought it was DJ Reed.
DJ Hall. I always get Bryce Hall and DJ Reed, not Bryce Hall. And so so you had like when that was there, Jayden Daniels gets the ball out on time, accurately, nice. And then everything outside of that just kind of looked late, and there was just three throws, like the throws that were actually down the field or towards the middle of the field, where he just kind of lobbed the ball into triple coverage. Just not even like a trying to fit the ball, put a ball in the space and a needle. It was kind of just lobbing the ball. Yeah. Zach Ertz actually came down with one. I guess
it was a really good catch.
I was reading a report that they called like offensive pass interference because they actually have referees there.
I didn't see that.
The other one, Sauce Gardner kind of dropped an interception on it, and then the other one was just overthrown out of the back of the end zone. And it's like when you have a rookie QB, what you don't want to see is when it's not easy, you're just kind of throwing the ball in harm's way, and that was. I'm just worried that this offense isn't going to help him much because the offensive line was really bad, right? Now, they were a little banged up, I guess. Like Cornelius Lucas was at left tackle getting work. Their right tackle was getting work. But we also don't Tyler Biadasz actually looked fairly good at center. But they were getting beat up. Jermaine Johnson was having quick wins. Will McDonald looked really good. And we could talk about that with the Jets. But Jayden Daniels, who I think is a prospect that does have flaws. And there's a reason why it took him a while to boom behind a great LSU offensive line and then these great receivers of Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. And I just don't know if this offense is going to be super friendly for him because it's basically throw the ball to the left sideline and then we'll see what you do with his legs. And credit to Jayden Daniels. I like that he likes to sit in the pocket and throw the ball instead of just trying to win a practice and scramble around.
Yeah, more, like Mariota was scrambling a whole lot more.
Yeah. Like I like the way that Jayden Daniels practices, but he did have a tough day. Now, to his credit, it was against a great defense that just closes.
Arguably the best defense in the NFL.
Yeah. So it's like you don't want to go too, and it's rain, so you don't want to go too harshly, but you look at the offensive structure and like I just don't know if this is. You're facing a lot of good pass rushes every single week.
Yeah.
And you can't have 3 really bad throws a game in the NFL.
I'm walking away from it being way more concerned about Cliff Kingsbury than I am Jayden Daniels.
That's fair. But at the same time, like Jayden Daniels is tied with Cliff Kingsbury essentially, right. Unless they were to fire him after
which
1 year.
Which I view that, I've talked all off season how I view that as a mistake, but I also don't know what the best alternative, but there is no point in talking about the alternative since this is the reality for them right now, and they didn't get the first 2 coaches that they wanted to for 2 different circumstances. Yes. So, I just don't like.
It feels like they're going to force feed Zach Ertz a bit, but honestly, Ben Sinnott looked pretty good.
He looked pretty good.
It's like okay, maybe you split some of those reps a little more than they want.
I think De'Ami Brown had a drop ball. What was pretty interesting, Bobby, we went back and forth in this a little bit in their TPP, where I think I suggested put Jahan Dotson in the slot because he was a slot at Penn State, but primarily through his first 2 years. I think 1 year he had more snaps in the slot than the other. But I was like, I want to see Jahan Dotson back in the slot and put De'Ami Brown on the outside. Now that's not I think De'Ami Brown on the outside is not a very good idea. He had a drop pass today. But I would love if they could find a way to get another outside receiver with Terry McLaurin, is somebody on their roster right now, or even if they fill that in after 53-man cutdown day, and then put Jahan Dotson in the slot because that's where I think his skill set fits. So you said for 1 team period, Dotson
he was mostly on the outside,
but then there was a team period where he was in the slot, and that made me excited. Like, that may be happening this year.
It's just. He's always going to be like, I'm looking at, 2022, he basically played, a 5th in the slot. And then last year,
it went up
last year about 40% or so.
Okay. So it went up. Yeah.
The issue is that they just don't have that presence on the out. Like,
no, they don't.
Like De'Ami Brown just hasn't been good in the NFL. And I think Ed McCaffrey, who they drafted, in the 3rd round I don't know. Ed is the father. Yes. I always mess it. Luke McCaffrey. I don't know how well he's going to fit on the outside of the NFL, but like Jahan Dotson wasn't involved at all because he was mostly lined up against Sauce Gardner because Sauce Gardner lines up on the right, DJ Reed on the left, and McLaurin's been lining up on the left, and then Jahan Dotson.
Yeah, it was De'Ami Brown that got a target and he dropped it. Terry McLaurin got a good amount of targets, and then it was Sinnott and Zach Ertz.
Yeah, they forced feed Zach Ertz
and screens to the running backs. That was the offensive. Distribution today for the Washington Commanders. So again, it
feels like an offense that's going to run through McLaurin and then Zach Ertz.
It feels like an offense that is going to be very easy to prepare for because teams are just going to know what's coming. It's that there could only be an option of so many things with Cliff Kingsbury of what he's going to go to and what's in his bag. And I think if you're predictable like that, you're going to be a very easy opponent to prepare for. And that's unfortunate.
And they're, to the Commanders coaches' credits, they're not flourished with talent. Like the offensive line is a real issue, right? And they weren't really able to get the running game going at all today. They look really, Jets defense looked really good in that area. And Dotson's a solid player, but Dotson isn't like this total game changer for you either. He's a good player. He should be starting on basically, any NFL team that doesn't have 3 like top-notch wide receivers. But like you said, he played outside mostly at Penn State, and it was like, okay, this guy should probably move into the slot in the NFL. He just struggles with press, right? And I remember the Rodgers McCreary matchup. Another guy who's moved inside in the NFL because of his lack of length. So you think of like the press guys who have the length, like Sauce Gardner today, and it's just he's better in the slot. Is he going to be someone who gives you 1,000 plus on a consistent basis? No, he's someone that you should be getting 700 to 800 on a consistent basis and can move your offense. But they just kind of have. He's been playing most, 80% outside, or 70, 80% outside since he's been on the Commanders, and they don't have that outside threat to really go. To feel good putting him out there, but I don't know. It's just it's a weird spot for this Commanders offense where it feels like Terry McLaurin is the only thing they really have going for them.
It also feels like they favor Brian Robinson Jr. more than Austin Eckler.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So
it's not even like they're splitting with the first team. It's Brian Robinson's the first team back. Austin Eckler.
They're using Austin Eckler as a kick returner.
Obviously, Eckler's going to get a bunch of snaps, but Robinson is that one for them
for sure.
On the flip side of that is the Jets defense, which looks just as good as ever, right? Basically, again, we just talked about it. Basically the only success the Commanders offense had was Terry McLaurin on hitches and outs versus DJ Reed, right? Who DJ Reed's a good corner, but I'm taking Terry McLaurin in that matchup, and those are kind of quick. You don't need a ton of protection to get those throws down, and they look ready. But I think what is looming over them right now is the fact that they traded away JFM, they lost Huff, and Reddick is just not there. He's just not, and we were talking with people there, Justin, and like we just don't. It's just he's throwing away money, and it feels like it's not going to get like there's no end in sight with this really. Now we could, this episode could drop and they have a deal done because he's going to be fined $750,000 if he misses the preseason game for them on Saturday, but they need him for them to be at their best. Because what they're so good at is that rotation. And those other guys did really, Jermaine Johnson, he looks really good. He had quick wins. Even Will McDonald, who I'm not the biggest fan of, when he was in team drill, he was bending the edge. He would have had a bone-crushing blindside sack on Jayden Daniels where he just bends around the edge and gets there. Michael Clemens was winning for them. Now, again, this is a bad Commanders offensive line, so they should show out. But you add Hassan Reddick to that, and that's a team, that's a group that upgraded. You remove Hassan Reddick to that, you've lost Huff, you trade away John Franklin Myers, then you're
banging on a lot of young guys to take a huge step up.
Then Jermaine Johnson's your one, right? And I love Jermaine Johnson, but I don't want him as
Michael Clemens and Will McDonald are your other one. Yeah. They're competing for that.
Yeah, it goes from such a great strength, one of the best pass rush, to just kind of like a good pass rush, which again, it's nice to have, but they need Hassan Reddick there. Leonard Taylor, the UDFA out of Miami, he had some good moments. It seems like him, Brady McGregor, and then Eric Watts, the two other UDFAs out of Michigan and UConn are battling for a spot there, which they did get some good UDFA talent out of those guys.
And isn't that crazy that we're talking about a unit that is already pretty stacked, and the UDFAs that stick out are coming from that pass rushing unit in that front?
Yeah. They know how to
get richer.
Spot talent with that. And then the secondary, the safeties weren't really challenged, so we didn't get to see. I wanted to watch their safeties because they lost what's his name that went to the Bucks? Whitehead?
Yeah, Jordan Whitehead.
Whitehead. They look really good, right? Like you said, DJ Reed gave a couple passes to McLaurin. Sauce wasn't even really challenged.
I want to say this too. Like it's apparent. Sauce isn't like muscular, but he's big and he's long.
Oh, and he's
just apparent when you see it in person.
He plays with so much confidence.
Looks like a freak.
Right? After every play, he's dancing. He's showing off. Like he he plays with confidence, and he is an alpha on that group. He had, essentially a dropped interception today where I wouldn't even call it dropped interception. He got his hands on a football that, could have been an interception. He just, we don't have to break down why Sauce Gardner's so freaking good. Was there anything else defensively that, popped up for you on them?
No, I really didn't have my eye on the Jets defense a ton. I mean, we know that they're good, and I was expecting them to have a good day against the Commanders offense, but again, the main takeaway from Jets defense versus Commanders offense is just really worried about the predictability of Cliff Kingsbury, because the fact that if we're sitting here and I don't know football like football people, but if we're sitting here and we're able to predict what's kind of coming on a down in, down out basis from an NFL coach, that's kind of bad. Guarantee NFL coaches know it. And I will add another little caveat to what we didn't say about the Commanders. Along with how we didn't see Jayden Daniels scramble at all, Bobby, we didn't see the Commanders do anything Jayden Daniels designed runs. So that will be a part of the offense as well, and that will help the offense.
Yeah, and they had one zone read thing they did in the red zone at the beginning of practice.
Yeah.
And that was basically it. So
but the Jets defense is good.
Which again, I think that's more game planning practice and training camp practice, like you're saying. With the Jets offense versus the Commanders defense, I actually kind of liked seeing them without Aaron Rodgers, because I get to see what their flaws are. And one of the main things I was looking for in the Jets offense, was what are the non-Garrett Wilson wide receivers doing? Michael Williams just came off of PUP. He wasn't out there practicing. And Aaron Rodgers can cover up flaws for receivers. And Allen, Garrett Wilson smoked Emmanuel Forbes all day, right? It was just play after play after play.
Garrett Wilson was unreal today.
Yeah, he was unreal. He was the best player on the field today for both sides. So we don't need to go in depth on that. Garrett Wilson's great. Emmanuel Forbes not so good. But here's the thing with Forbes. They went to Mike Allen Lazard 4 times in a row.
Same route too.
Four. Yeah, they're a little different. 4 times in a row. And Emmanuel Forbes had a pass breakup on 3 of them. And the one catch was like a bang, bang, tight play too.
Yeah.
And I just worry with Mike Williams' health, they kind of lack slot. I know they like Gibson there, and they have Malachi Corley, who I wasn't too overly impressed with today, that they are so Garrett Wilson reliant, and they just need Mike Williams to stay healthy. And I think that's just a bad bet. That to me is their biggest worry on offense, is if teams really look to stop Garrett Wilson, how will they do? Now, here's the other part of that, though, is that Lazard is good with Aaron Rodgers, right? We've heard reports out of camp that Allen Lazard has had a good camp after being an awful player last year, that he's looked good in camp today with no – and he did have another catch for a zone over the middle of the field where he had a good adjustment to the ball. But it was just but you just watch him and you're like, this is not a good receiver, but Rodgers has just been able to put the ball in the perfect place for him, and he can make a nice, tough catch. So that's my worry. And then, I was hoping Malachi Corley could look like someone who's going to step in the slot. And I leave unimpressed with his route running, which was my biggest worry of him coming out of Western Kentucky, where I'm like, this is awesome, all this yak stuff, but everything's a screen. He's not going to get those touches in the NFL. And the route running's bad. He just doesn't separate. And that showed up. He had one nice catch on the sideline versus zone. He had a drop on a slant. And then because he was mostly with the second team, I would focus in on him because I'm not worried. I'm not stressed about everyone else. And there was just a lack of separation with man coverage, and there was a lack of understanding of the zone coverages he was going against.
Yeah, for sure. But what was fun for the Jets is their offensive line. And really the starters in Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses
gave him a lot of time.
They were only out there in team periods for the first team period of the day. And then Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses were done after that. But in that one series that they were in, Bobby, they moved heaven and earth. Breece Hall had a lot of room to run. Tyrod Taylor had a lot of time. But really, it was I feel like it was the main emphasis of they were running the ball well. And I do view the Commanders' defense as a front that can stop the run, where you have Bobby Wagner. You have some solid edge rushers. Obviously, you have Payne and Allen on the inside. So I view that as a unit that even with the questionable secondary, that they can stop the run. But Tyron Smith, Morgan Moses, the rest of the AVT, Joe Tippmann, John Simpson on the inside, they were moving guys, and it was fun to see. And then even when they came out, Olu was fun to watch at left tackle. I think they had Max Mitchell in at right tackle. And it's a fun line. Joe Tippmann there's some questions on him. He had there were no disaster snaps today in team periods. There was a disaster snaps in one. There was a disaster snap in 1v1, and that's been something that we've been hearing, that Joe Tippmann has the yips at center, according to Ryan Dunleavy. So he was all right. I just found that he was on the ground a little bit more than maybe you would like an offensive lineman to be.
Yeah, so they really rebuilt that offensive line. Like I think that's when talking about the Jets as contenders. I don't think people talk about like how quickly they they added Moses, Simpson, Tyron Smith, and then drafting Olu. Now Olu wasn't as good as I hoped him to be today. There's times where he oversets, and it's just like, okay, he can kind of be worked inside a little bit. But that sometimes happens with tackles where they're just like, I don't kind of worry about that NFL speed around the corner, and they overset and set themselves up for inside moves. But there wasn't like any like disastrous plays. But he didn't look ready to just be a stud from day one. But yeah, the rest of that offensive line looked really good. It was cool to see Tyron Smith out there. They like you said, they look like they can run the ball. Braylon Allen was getting in some wide zone stuff, and it's like, man, this guy, if you give this guy this type of holes at that size, then you're gonna have yourself a nice little run game. And again, I think the most the offensive line was actually fixed by the Jets, and Tyrod Taylor is just so much better than what they had last year.
Yeah.
That like Rodgers not being out there wasn't a disaster for them. And if Rodgers misses 3 games or whatever it is, they are in so much better hands than they were last year or the year before that.
I think they could play 500 ball. Like, if Aaron Rodgers goes out, and
even better with that defense.
I would agree. I would agree. Hey, if they played close to 500 ball without, with the quarterback situation that they had the last couple of years, maybe they should play better than 500 ball. Like if Aaron Rodgers gets them off to a 5-2 start, like I very much see them being 3 games above 500 for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
Hypothetically, hopefully it doesn't get to that. But I mean, even the Jets offensive line, they were opening up holes for Isaiah Davis as well, who had some nice physical runs throughout the day.
South Dakota State.
Braylon Allen is just a big dude. It's not a draft pick that I really love, but you could just see the size of him in person as well. So Jets offense is fun, but it is a major question of wide receiver too, or even slot wide receiver. It's a huge question that, at least today, wasn't fully answered for us when we were watching.
Yeah. With the Commanders' defense, you pointed this out early in practice. Fedarian Mathis, who was a second-round pick from them a couple years ago out of Alabama, defensive tackle, and he's been on my radar. He had a really good game versus the Giants last year and John Michael Schmitz. He should be fucking playing for somebody, but he's not going to on this Commanders team because they have Jonathan Allen, who probably looked like the best player on defense for the Commanders today.
Jonathan Allen blew someone up at one point.
Yeah, which like you don't really see that shit in practice.
They were bringing dudes to the ground. It wasn't a physical, like, if we may talk about the Lions Giants show in practice, and we have a Giants show, so if you want to hear us talk about that, we talk about it on our Giants show. But that was a physical practice from the point of they were getting chippy. I mean, they were bringing each other to the ground. So and there was no fight. They had some shoving, but there was nothing near to like a fight, Bobby. So I guarantee you, the coaches maybe made it clear.
Saul said that Saleh said, like, we're not going to tell you what the punishment was, but they made it sure we didn't want to.
Oh, really?
Throw a punch.
But they were bringing guys down to the ground too, which usually that's how those fights start. Of, am I going to be too physical on defense? Am I not going to be physical enough? Is this offensive player going to run me the frick over when I'm not expecting him to because we're not supposed to tackle? They were tackling dudes.
Yeah.
So your interior defensive lineman.
It's just you have Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne. Those are going to be your 1s and 2s, and then they drafted Johnny Newton, who I don't think was out there today.
No.
And it feels like Fedarian Mathis is going to be forgotten. And again, Fedarian Mathis hasn't lived up to his draft status. He hasn't been great. But whenever I like focus in and watch him play in the NFL, I'm like, I like what I see, and I think he's someone that can contribute to a team.
Dude, he kicked ass in 1v1s.
Yeah, maybe
kicked ass.
Maybe if he like has another strong preseason and they feel good about Johnny Newton's health, this is a guy that they can look to do some type of like, cut down day trade, pick swap or something like that. Because I just feel like he's like the only position of depth that the Commanders have is that essentially that defensive tackle room, or maybe you could say linebacker too. The other things with the Commanders defense, good before we get to the really bad. And I think we shouldn't do Ayuk on this.
I want to stay with the interior defensive line for 1 second. The first depth chart that they released, they do have John Ridgeway ahead of Fidarian Mathis. So, and I'm even a big John Ridgeway guy, the former Arkansas Razorback, and he was signed to the Cowboys too. And that was another unit that had a lot of depth and they had a lot of space, and they just had to let John Ridgeway go. And then another team with a lot of depth at interior D line signed John Ridgeway. So I think Fidarian Mathis, like I even think just pre-draft, thinking of my pre-draft thoughts, and then even right now too, Fidarian Mathis is better than John Ridgeway, but he's listed ahead on the depth chart right now. I think one of those guys is going to be cut, and then another one of those, like whoever gets cut from this should be on it, another NFL roster. And they maybe even could contribute.
Absolutely. Didn't see much out of them, but I really like Frankie Louvu and Jeremy Chin on this defense, at least on a short-term basis. I thought Frankie Louvu looked good out there. They signed him from the Panthers, and then obviously Jeremy Chin from the Panthers as well. I just feel like they fit this defense well. But and again, we got to do a show in 8 minutes, so we're not going to do the Ayuk stuff. We'll just do an emergency episode whenever that happens. When we did our TPP on the Commanders, our two biggest worries were the offensive line, and our biggest worry was the secondary.
Yeah. And
you come away from this and like, man, this is gonna really screw this team over.
And Aaron Rodgers less, Nathaniel Hackett led offense with Garrett Wilson's a really good wide receiver, but still like you only had they're not game planning for the Jets, but Garrett Wilson's a really good player, but it's not like Aaron Rodgers was leading this offense today, and they got diced up.
Yeah, I mean, Emmanuel Forbes got torn up. Benjamin St. Juste didn't look very good. And I think he gave the most yards in the NFL last year. This secondary is really bad, and I think it's really. If Jayden Daniels is what they think it is, I think it's going to be the thing that holds it back. Because if Jayden Daniels is what they think it is, he'll be able to help that offensive line with some of the quick passes that Kingsbury gives him, but also his legs. You can work around a bad offensive line a bit, right? It's gonna hold you back from being a really good offense, but you can do some things. With this secondary, I feel like they're in a lot of trouble because the pass rush, I like some of the things they've done. I like Dorrance Armstrong and Dante Fowler on the edge. I love Jonathan Allen. You need those two guys in the middle to really put up their best years and not, average years like they did the last season. But that secondary is just it's a problem. Like they're in a really, really bad spot with the cornerback group.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Were you surprised to see Clelin Ferrell starting over Dante Fowler?
Yeah, absolutely.
That was one of my first things is where's Dante Fowler? Because Clelin Ferrell was getting those he was getting those reps.
And Fowler was out there today too, right?
Yeah, he was out there.
Okay. Yeah. So there's just there's some I just worry about that secondary. And I feel like it's a team that's just going to get passed on a ton this year. So, but yeah, so I mean, long story short, we were there at those practices today, and you come away feeling good about the Jets, especially the fact that they didn't have Aaron Rodgers, and you come away feeling like, man, this Commanders team, who had the second pick last year, might be destined to be picking in the top 3 again.
Yeah, yeah,
because even like Jayden Daniels didn't do anything to like relieve. This guy's going to lift them up.
Right.
If anything, it's like, okay, this offensive structure and talent could make his rookie season a real struggle.
Right. But was proud of, you brought up, this was such a good point that I didn't think of it, was proud of Jayden Daniels of the fact that he didn't tank the practice, the rest of the unit, like the Jets defense and the Washington offense by running, because you can't touch quarterbacks. So you're going to run. Of course, it's going to be a big gain. So he didn't do that. He stood in there. We know that he can do that. We know that you have his legs. And we've talked about time and time again that the legs of Jayden Daniels may save the season from being a disaster to being, just okay, but there's still a lot to clean up.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, and it's just
tough when you're banking on
it's not just a quick left sideline throw or a screen. It's just the ball comes out late. It doesn't look like he's confident in what he's seeing. And that's the worry with Jayden coming out of LSU, right? Where it's like, hey, you got first read Malik Neighbors or Brian Thomas on slot fades. Sick. He can throw that shit or a quick throw when it's like, I got to read the middle of the field It's just you didn't see that. Now, again, like you said, you can tell that he's working on it, and he needs to get better at that to become the pro that he wants to be, and not just win with his talent right away.
Yeah.
So it's good that he's working on it, but it looked really, really ugly too.
Yeah, disappointed we didn't see him just rip it one play down like deep. We didn't even see that.
No,
it was rain. It was raining. It was pouring. The old man was snoring.
Yeah, but it's just every throw that wasn't those quick throws was into double or triple coverage.
Yeah. Tyrod threw some nice deep balls today, and it was raining. So
yeah, okay, exactly. So,
any Lions thoughts? Quick, because we talk about the Giants all the time. We don't need to talk about the Giants. From the Giants Lions joint practice,
their corner upgrades didn't look as good as you would hope, right? Whether that's Carlton Davis, Terrion Arnold, the first round pick,
Kirby Joseph.
Kirby Joseph has been there at safety, but it's basically Terrion Arnold and Carlton Davis. They're going to be upgrades over what's up, AirPods. They're going to be upgrades over what they had last year, and I think they're going to be a fine spot defensively. But I think from those practices, they didn't look at it like a strength. It looked like Malik Neighbors dominated Arnold, and Darius Slayton was able to get open versus Carlton Davis pretty consistently.
Yeah, and even some of the Giants, even some of their interior guys too, were able to have some success against the Lions interior. And
Zeitler wasn't out there to hit, to their credit, and then their other two interior guys are not as good as their tackles in Decker and Sewell. But that was my thing. Is like those corner. They added those corner. They added Terrion Arnold. They added Carlton Davis. They added Amik Robertson. But they didn't look like a strength. They didn't look like this huge weakness that they were for them last year. But they didn't. And I will say Arnold just looked bad. Now he was going against Malik Neighbors, who's supposed to be like this stud from day one, but he just looked like he's in line for a rough rookie season.
Yeah, and I will give a little bit of a Giants talking away point. I mean, I think the Lions are going to be good. Like I'm confident in them. I think they have a very talented roster. Was a little disappointed in their secondary for sure, but from a Giants standpoint, it was cool to just see them fight physically and metaphorically, because that was a team last year that the Giants traveled to Detroit and we were there, and they got their teeth kicked in. So for a Giants team that started off really slow, Sunday Night Football, they get beat 40-0. And they have a very, they wound up being 2-8 after 10 weeks. It was cool to see them during this summer bounce back, fight back against a good football team. So really, I do take, even from trying to be a non-biased NFL talking head, I take a little bit more away from the Giants being like, good for them for showing up against a team that maybe they have no business competing against, but they competed with them for not just one day, but for 2 days.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, that's football today. We'll see you guys when the Brandon Ayuk trade happens. If not, we will see you on Wednesday with Eagles and Patriots practice. Until then, see ya. Bye-bye. Where's Chris Rose? People are asking.